I'm going to call this meeting to order. It is July the 20th, 2021. In chambers, we have Mayor Ronnie Velasquez. Remotely, we have Council Member Grady Simpson. Missing in action time is Mayor Rick Carmona on an excused absence, and Councilwoman Stephanie Holmes Thomas is also on an excused absence. With that being said, we will start off with the invitation. Mr. Shumpert is going to help us out.
Let's all bow together. Our loving and merciful Father, it is indeed with humble and grateful hearts that we can come to you this evening to discuss the business of this great city. And we would ask you to look down upon our council members and all of our city staff and bless them and bless the work that they do for the furtherance of all of us here in this great city. And continue to bless each and every one of them and bless them in the decisions that they make this evening and going forward. We'd ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
All right, we're to item 4, Mayor and Council Community Recognition. Councilwoman or Mr. Simpson, do you have anything to present?
No, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, next item is item number 5, here remarks from visitors. We do not have any remarks from visitors. Okay, moving on, item 6. Item 6.1, getting into the business. Let's see, item 6.1, discuss award for Phase 2 improvements at Kings Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant. A bit of a refresher, the project went to bid, and it looks like Mike McKeska, Assistant City Engineer, will be sharing the funding source, bid results, and a map updating what the new property project will look like.
Mayor Pro Tem and Council, this project was bid on
Excuse me, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm not able to hear Mr. McKeska.
Okay, Grady, we are going to grab a mic real quick.
Mike wasn't there.
Yes. Okay. I'll start over. On June 17th, we received bids for this project. And fortunately, we had a lot of response, had 9 contractors bid on it. There was a lot of interest. The engineer's estimate was somewhere around $14.5 million. Garber reviewed the bids. McGinnis Brothers was low. If you want to see kind of the spread of the bids, that's on page 6 on the bid tab. McGinnis is on towards the far right, next to the last column, and they were the low bidder at $13,655,913. And the recommendation was to award the total bid. There's a couple of alternate deducts that were on there, and we put those, and those were some work on existing process equipment and the opportunity to withdraw that cost in the event we thought the bids came in a little surprisingly high. That did not happen, so the recommendation is to award to McGinnis in that amount that I mentioned. The spread was pretty extensive. Garber did note an error in Crescent's bid. It's highlighted in yellow. They had a typo basically, which took their bid to $51 million, and that was a typo on trench safety. And so anyway, they caught that it's not going to happen. So basically, where we are at is with this recommendation, we would proceed forward with award, and the outline on page 8 shows some of the work that was done. This was talked about during the budget meeting. We're going to add aeration basins and systems, sludge pumps, do some rehab on a final clarifier, build a new clarifier as well, and then rehab some pumps or some valves in our pump station. So, as well as all the electrical and piping and SCADA work that goes with that. So that's the recommendation. The process, just to give you an idea on timing, the bids have already been submitted to the Water Development Board for review. They have to take a look at the DBE participation and make sure they don't have any concerns. And that's ongoing. And we're hopeful in the next, within the next 3 to 4 weeks to get everything approved by them, and we'd be ready to issue a notice to proceed, assuming y'all have no problems with this bid recommendation. So, any questions? So,
Okay, and just for clarification, the total amount is $13,655,913. Funding for this came out of our the borrow that we just approved. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is the Texas Water Development Board project that we've talked so much about. And so, remember, it's a multi-phase project. And so we started a couple of years ago with some safety and electrical improvements at the wastewater treatment plant. And as we've marched through this, we're basically marching through that loan and borrowing program that we have with the Texas Water Development Board. So this is already built into your wastewater rates. So as we've been ramping those up over the last few years, we've been doing that in the anticipation of this particular project. Mike, you want to give any more notes about that?
Yes, it is. It's about 90% of this is tied into that. You know, the TWDB money, the only clarification I would add is that it is split between 20-year. When it was initially set up, we had 20-year loan money and 30-year loan. This is 20. So reviewed where we're at. We've also talked about some additional borrowing that could be needed to supplement this. But we're good to go in the plan so far moving forward. And the only thing I would add is McGinnis Brothers, they were the low bidder and the contractor for phase 1 as well. And at that time, that award was recommended by Garber. They had already had experience with them. McGinnis completed the project successfully. They have a couple of punch list items to finish, and they're done and ready to go to work on phase 2.
Okay.
Mayor, it probably is worth mentioning for folks who weren't on council at the time that all of this was sort of started up discussion-wise, and that is that the 20-year borrow is based on the idea that we're building facilities that we expect to last and be adequate for the city for a 20-year period. So we didn't want to have debt going from year 21 to year 30 on something that, well, what if there are other development pressures that occur that would make us do something bigger and different in that period of time? So because of that uncertainty, the strategy was put this on 20-year debt.
Yeah, that's a good strategy. Council in 2040 will appreciate that. So, okay.
You'll be a grandfather by then, Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, Grady, say it one more time.
You'll be a great grandfather by then, sir.
Yeah, that's it. So I would say, Mr. Simpson or Councilwoman, do you have any questions for Mr. McKeska?
Not on my behalf, Mayor Pro Tem. Everything has pretty much been laid out. It's plain and simple.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving down the line. 6.2, discuss award for professional services for a quiet zone study. Looks like Steve Rogers is going to present and walk us through the initial phase study of quiet zones. And we should also acknowledge we have a couple of members of Kimberly Horn here. Nathan Ante and Scott Arnold are with us also.
Would y'all wave when you introduce yourself so we know who you are? Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm going to introduce Nathan, ask him just to come on up here. Nathan's going to go through a PowerPoint presentation that you have in your packet. And we did a, we did a consultant selection with Mr. Sims, Mr. Fenner, and myself, and we had 2 groups that we interviewed, and we had one interview that we thought was going to be hard to beat, and they got beat. And so we had 2 very high-quality teams, and I'm happy to tell you that we're proud to take the first step in that and moving forward with some downtown projects and quiet zones and complete streets and all that. And so these guys have a lot of experience. They're going to talk to you about 9 downtown rail crossings that we're going to look at in detail for quiet zones plus FM 148 and Metro Drive. And so I'm going to let Nathan walk you through his PowerPoint presentation and kind of come back and go over the agreement and tell you what we're going to do there and go from there. So I'm going to turn it over to Nathan on to you at Kimley.
As Nathan's coming up, I'll just add in that this approach comes from a really simple observation, and that is our downtown railroad crossings are awfully close to US 80, and our downtown railroad crossings include Virginia, which is Spur 226. Since Spur 226 and US 80 are the 2 roads that we have a funded project we're working on to do complete streets, the thought is we should really unify those designs and have one consulting firm working both on the quiet zones and on the US 80/Spur 226 complete streets project. In order to make progress on both of these projects, we really wanted one firm. We felt like that was going to be much simpler. I'll show you some information about the public involvement firm that we're having them bring in as a partner on this as well. But we're, as Steve mentioned, thrilled with this firm, and we think they've got the combined resources to do both complete streets and quiet zones. Job one is to get out and fire off like a rocket on quiet zones to make sure that we don't just do these correctly, but we also put that input into the South Alley project, because as you know, we've got a lot of work going on in the South Alley as well. So anyway, lots going on here, very exciting project, so take it away, Nathan.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Steve, and good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Like Steve said, I'm Nathan Ante, and I've been with Kimley Horn for over 20 years, and working with the team that we pulled together that I've worked with for most of my career. And we'll do some intros here in a minute. Excited to be here today to talk to you about this initial first step, and that's looking at your quiet zone, specifically in the downtown area, and how they tie with your overall street improvement projects and other downtown initiatives. So like Mike had mentioned, getting a head start on these is really important. So we also understand the long-term downtown initiatives and goals are more than just quiet zones, they're more than just streets, they're more than just sidewalks, they're really economic development initiatives and also safety enhancements in the downtown. And looking at the quiet zone sooner rather than later in the process will be beneficial as we move on to later phases. So before I get into quiet zones, I want to do a few quick introductions. Again, worked with a number of municipalities around North Texas over my career on downtowns and quiet zones. And also with us is Scott Arnold. Scott and I started our careers together at Kimley Horn almost 20 years ago. So he and I have worked side by side on a lot of projects like this. And he specializes in quiet zone studies, designs, and implementations, and he's doing that really all over the state. So great partner to be part of the team to help us get through that, including some cities that have downtown initiatives, but also have rail crossings. And it's a big part of getting those reinvestments in the downtown is to get the crossings quiet. And there's also a few other folks on here, Travis and Tom Grant. Also spent my entire career with them as well. Tom and I have partnered on a lot of street projects like this. His expertise is traffic, and so a big traffic component is involved with this. And also Travis. Travis brings a perspective, a TxDOT perspective, that with some of these corridors being on a TxDOT route, that's really important. Finally, we partnered with JBJ, and on page 32 of your packet is a little flyer on JBJ, but really excited to have them part of our team, part of the public engagement team, and can help build and maintain consensus and positive momentum moving forward, not just with quiet zones, but as we move forward with the complete streets.
And I'll just pause here to say JBJ is sort of the public involvement team that Dallas Area Rapid Transit uses for difficult topics that they run into when they build rail stations and when they build transit-oriented developments. So I really felt like they had a good skill set match, and we're used to sitting down and saying, hey, we're going to build something brand new next to a rail line. The rail line's going to do stuff, development's going to change. You know, how do we get the existing neighborhood and the existing businesses involved? They've got a good skill set there. So that's, we didn't make them come out today to meet with us, but they'll be a good asset for the group as well.
This slide shows a map of your downtown and a few of the current and future initiatives, and many of them are defined in your downtown master plan and also supported by your recent Complete Streets policy. So the South Alley, as mentioned, that's in the magenta color. Also, the red lines are the TxDOT corridors, so those are streets that would have some TxDOT engagement and TxDOT involvement. And the blue are also some Complete Streets, city streets that where y'all may have a little more flexibility because you don't have TxDOT involved. And of course, the yellow line is the railroad crossing. And before we really get it too far into developing the street options, which would be a separate proposal later, this initial study is really to determine what limitations and opportunities we have at each of these crossings in the downtown area to make them quiet zone compliant. As these will help inform and prioritize and also cost what we can do on your streets, because they could impact access or parking or things like that. So we just want to better understand what's going to be required there before we start onto the Complete Streets. So quiet zones, so talked a lot about them. So what are they and how do we establish them, and why do we need to look at them now? So as you all know, the UP Railroad runs parallel to 80, and you've got about 24 street crossings within your city. Some are improved, others are not, and the horn goes off at a lot of those crossings. I know y'all hear that. And this first study, again, will just focus on the downtown crossing, so it'll help us with the Complete Streets improvements. So what is a quiet zone? A lot of text on this, but it's something that's established by a local government, like your all city or a public agency. They must be a half mile in length. You've got a lot of crossings within a half mile corridor. All crossings must have flashing lights and gates. The city is responsible to install supplementary safety measures and reimburse the railroad for those infrastructure costs. So I'll talk a little bit about those. And then the city at the end will certify to the Federal Railroad Administration that the improvements meet the required level of risk reduction as defined by the railroad. So once these established, the railroads are not permitted to sound the horn unless there's an emergency situation at each of those crossings. So first, the supplementary safety measures. There's a number of things that can be done, and that's what we're going to evaluate as part of this study, and what impacts they have and what costs they have. So a 4-quadrant gate system, that's what's shown on the right. That's where you've got 4 gates, one on each quadrant. So it goes all the way across. A little more common and what we see more often are the medians or channelization. These are medians that are added so cars can't go around parked cars when there is the rail is active. Also, conversion to one-way traffic without a median is an option, and of course, closure of streets is another option. Of course, you wouldn't need to sound the horn if there wasn't a crossing there. So we'll evaluate all these, the cost and the impacts to adding medians, conversion to one-way, and the four gate system. The railroad infrastructure improvements, these are all improvements that the railroad would do and the city would reimburse. So these are typically the improvements that are done in railroad right-of-way, the new concrete crossing panels, the gates and arms, the relocation of existing equipment, the new cabinets. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of agreements that need to be put in place for that. So this study will help identify all that. And of course, the city would enter into an agreement. So I won't go through these 9 steps, but this is the process that we would go through after this study, and that would involve a lot of agreements, and this process could take anywhere from 18 to 24 months typically, depending on how we package them. So a lot of the improvements that the city would be responsible could be done prior to, but those railroad improvements, the crossings, the panels would be done as part of it.
And sort of to pause on that time period, do remember that our funding from the county bond program for this is $2 million of county bond program funds for quiet zones. We always intended that that money would serve as a local match for a larger project. So one of the things that we're doing here is we're going to get a cost estimate for these from Kimley-Horn and then use that to actually try to go out and get grant funds. So if you say, well, can we do it that fast? We might be able to do it that fast, but doing it that fast is also going to be reliant on our grant agency providing another $8 million to go with what the county provided for this project. So lots to be done to make that happen, and we may have delays waiting for grants related to this project.
So what are the next steps? Again, this is the proposal that you all have starting on page 10, and this is the initial downtown quiet zone study for those 9 crossings in the downtown area that could impact and influence what we do on the streets themselves. So that's the goal with this, is to identify what needs to be done, what costs those would be, and it's all work that we could build on once we do get into design and once funding is identified. Similar to the Complete Streets proposal, it's all work that could be built upon. So one of the task 1 on here is survey and topo, doing some survey work out in the field. That's going to be needed regardless. So getting a jump start on that will help. Having a more solid plan will help with the funding as well. So next steps and timeline. This initial downtown quiet zone study, we're ready to hit the ground running. We've got surveyors lined up. We could get that work done and report back to y'all within 60 to 90 days. And then after that, later this fall, we could come to you with a phase 1 Complete Streets proposal after working with city staff that would really include a lot of public engagement and JBJ as well. And also finish out the rest of the quiet zones along the corridor so that hopefully by summer of 2022, once funds are identified, you've got a solid plan that can be implemented not just on the railroad crossings, but also on the complete streets that could be pieced out over time. So with that, I'll stick around for any questions or comments.
I'd say thank you
Yes,
for the presentation. And Grady, did you have something?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sorry for the interruption. You know, I always thought, you know, being raised in this city, I always thought we had too many railroad crossings. The only advantage that I thought that I had when I was a kid, if the train was coming, I can go to the next railroad crossing and maybe beat the train on down on the other end, right? But is there any part of the strategy is to maybe minimize some of the railroad crossings, or has that ever been brought up?
I'm going to tackle that one and say that we'll be as delicate as we can in that. I'll use the example of Delphine. This is going to be my kind of go-to example. If I look at Delphine, I've got Virginia right next to Delphine. So I got plenty of traffic moving across Virginia across the railroad tracks there. I've got a limited amount of development going on Delphine right now. And I have a bridge right next to Delphine. So I've got all the opportunities in the world to cross people back and forth, and I'm not impacting any residential properties when we do that. So Delphine would be an example of, well, okay, between the bridge and Virginia, is that a good location to close a crossing? And I'm going to tell you that because the spur railroad track that goes down to Builder's First Source crosses right at Delphine as well, that's probably going to be a pretty good candidate to looking at closing Delphine as part of this program. It's hard to pick out other ones that would be easy to close because there's a lot of localized traffic factors that you get into when you talk about closing them. But we'll give the free rein to the consultant here, and we'll ask them that same question and let them study it up and see what other recommendations they might have.
All right. Thanks for the response.
Grady, that was a good comment. And then I would ask, what does public engagement look like on an item like this?
Yeah, so that is a task for that if needed, that's something that JBJ could be engaged to do before we really get started on the Complete Streets projects. And as we look at each of these 9 crossings, there may be scenarios where we need to add a median And if we add a median, that may require some easements outside right-of-way. Well, before we propose some improvements that would impact things outside right-of-way, this would be an opportunity to bring in the public engagement folks.
Yeah, and I would say just sort of as a kickoff way here, because it's such a complicated program that involves 80, 226, all these railroad crossings, I'm interested in doing something up front on the front end of this project that can be included in this dollar amount you saw here, which would be some sort of, I don't want to necessarily use the phrase town hall because you kind of get a preconceived notion there. It might be an open house, something that is a opportunity for the public and the downtown business owners to come in and just start talking to us about it and be an initial way for us to collect their feedback. I would say overall, my message to council here is going to be, I used to manage the quiet zone program for the region when I was at COG. Some cities do it exactly right. And you can look at Arlington as an example. They put a quiet zone in place. They had a developer come forward and say, hey, I'd like to build an apartment complex on one side. They had some restaurants come forward and build on the other side. They decided to build their own library directly right next to the railroad tracks, same railroad tracks we have, but a busier section of those same railroad tracks. And it kicked off their redevelopment. And UT Arlington has grown toward the railroad tracks, and downtown Arlington has grown around the railroad tracks, exactly what you wanted to see. We've got another example, and I won't use names because that's not polite, but I got another example for you where they did it wrong and they managed the program incorrectly. You can lose your quiet zone if you violate the terms of your quiet zone, and they lost their quiet zone. And so now they've had difficulties with the development they were hoping to put around the railroad tracks because they didn't manage it over the long term correctly. So you got to be really careful when you embark on quiet zones that you're messing with the railroad, and they're gonna take any commitment you take, any commitment you make to the railroad, they're gonna take very, very seriously.
Thank you for joining us today. So we reviewed tasks 1 through 4 that you'll be involved in over the next 2 years, the analysis, and the beginning of the Complete Streets project, and closing of or implementing the quiet zones. What, if any, are the additional steps after 1 through 4 are completed?
Yeah, that's a good question. So these task 1 through 4 is really the upfront work that we want to get done in the next 60 to 90 days. And then the next proposal would be the actual design and implementation and getting those agreements in place with the railroad for not just these 9 crossings, but the other 15 crossings in the downtown, so it can be packaged together as one plan that can be implemented over time. So the reason we wanted to take these 9 downtown ones and get a jump start on them is because they could influence the decisions that are made and priorities for the complete streets. So of course, when you add a median from a block to a block, you may cut off some cross-street access, or it may impact some driveways or things like that. So we just want to get a head start and look at the downtown.
Yeah, and it may be as simple as the vertical side of the analysis, right? Everything in the engineering world is, what's the exact elevation? Is it 3 inches too high? Is it 3 inches too low? Do I have 20 feet or do I have 30 feet to work with? Well, having this analysis on quiet zones up front will give us the information necessary to make sure that we don't build the South Alley project in the wrong place, and that we don't build US 80 in the wrong place. Whatever we do there and whatever we do on Spur 226, they can all be done. We might be still working on federal approval on quiet zone, but at least we'll have put our other improvements in the right places.
So, Micah, you mentioned, keeping up with requirements that the railroad may require. So is that something that staff would do here? Would it be an additional service that we would acquire from?
I would say that right now, I would say that we probably have the staff necessary, that if all of the improvements were in place, that we could keep track of it. I would say that sometimes it's as simple as, now you know that you can't allow a driveway at a certain location anymore. Well, if we've covenanted that we are going to treat this as a quiet zone, and we said, well, there's not going to be a right-hand turn there, and you can't make a turn there, then we can't ever issue a driveway permit. Well, that needs to be out of the engineering office, right? And our own engineering office needs to be able to say, hey, we know we're never going to issue a right turn permit right there. And that's just an example of it. Another example is on the quad gate side of it. Under the quad gate side of it, let's say the city council 2, 3, 4, 5 years later says, man, we're really tired of paying that bill to Union Pacific every year because they charge us extra for quad gates instead of dual gates. Well, once you stop paying for those quad gates, Union Pacific is going to file a complaint at Federal Railroad, and the federal government's going to come back and say, oh, well, you stopped paying for quad gates, so we're going to deauthorize your quiet zone. So there's quite a bit to keep track of, but I think that's a staff can keep track of an activity.
Just to clarify one more time, the agreement that's in front of us is just the analysis, and then there will be a second agreement that should come forward for design and proposal. Then, of course, and we'll need to enter into additional agreements for the actual work that will be completed.
You'll see a different agreement for the complete streets work.
That's a great point you made, Ronnie. And again, this agreement, if you look on agenda page 14, you have a not to exceed amount of $102,900 for this effort. And as we move to the next steps of this, the project's going to get larger, and the money's going to get a lot larger than this when we get into design. So this is just to give us kind of a first step. It also helps us start moving the Complete Streets project forward after we get this data and we know more about it. It helps us to start moving more on Complete Streets and possibly South Alley. Right now, we're kind of at hold until we have this information to know how this is going to impact those two projects. But the next step after we do this $102,900 is going to be to get into design. As Mike mentioned earlier, the $2 million carved out was just for design of this project, generally speaking. And then he mentioned an $8 million figure, and that may not be enough for construction of what's needed. Depends on how far we want to go. Right now, we've kept it to 9 crossings. If we want to make this more robust and cover more of our town, we're going to have to expand what we're looking at. And that'll be part of what you'll have options to look at later on once we get past this first step. You want to make this a bigger project, bigger dollars, or do we want to keep this contained to just those 9 crossings?
And Mike, I assume that this is our money up front, and we ask the county for reimbursement through the bond?
So again, great clarification. Probably 4 months ago, council approved, and then the county approved our interlocal agreement between the city and the county on the 2019 county bond funds. So that allows us to spend certain monies now and then get reimbursed. They run about 90 days out on their reimbursements. So this contract is eligible for reimbursement under that interlocal agreement. We'll use our public-private partnership fund. We'll spend money. We'll send a bill over to Kaufman County. We'll wait a little bit. They'll get us reimbursed.
Okay, and then when will we see this pop back on our agenda for action?
Next Tuesday.
Okay, so if we'll see it in FY '21, and we'll have to cut a check in FY '21, and then the reimbursement comes in FY '22?
Thank you. I love it that you're concerned, and I know that Jay is now going to be the #1 guy concerned. But no problem at all, because there's a adequate fund balance in the public-private partnership fund to rotate the money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, good.
That's a good question. Again, it's going to depend on timing, but this effort that we're talking about here, contained in this for them, is about a 60-day effort. It could stretch a little longer, but it's around the 60. So it's going to put us right about the end of the fiscal year. So we'll probably get invoiced for the majority of this in this current fiscal year.
Okay, okay. Well, I think I'm out of questions. I would say, hey, thanks to the Kimberly Horn Group for coming to explain it. It was a good, comprehensive presentation, and we as a city are looking forward to take action on it next Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, 6.3, discuss information technologies outsourcing umbrella contract. Looks like Becca Anderson will be briefing on this contract and the master service agreement, and we have some representation from the True North Group also. Okay, Becca.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Thank you for your time this evening. As you know, the IT world is a constantly changing environment that must be managed and maintained at all times. The goal for staff in the IT department is to ensure we have up-to-date infrastructure and equipment that allows citizens to access and use all of our services and resources anytime online. For us to accomplish that, we must provide staff in each department with all of the technology they need to perform their daily tasks while staying within our budget. The COVID-19 pandemic forced us to quickly move our services online, and in doing so, we've discovered several areas in IT that need immediate attention. That means updating, replacing, and in some instances, removing some hardware and software, consolidating some software between departments, that kind of thing. We're bringing a proposal to you for a partnership with True North IT Services. We have some representatives here. They are an IT service company that can and will help us make the necessary changes to better serve the citizens and staff in a cost-effective and timely manner. Okay. Oh, I've got the clicker. Okay. And we're rolling. The way that the IT department is currently aligned creates some confusion and disorganization, and as a result of that, there is overspending and a delay in project completion. The previous IT staff did a great job, but it's time to update and make some changes. We have, as you can see on the slide, we have a number of vendors that we use in the IT department, and with the current contracts that we have, there is a lot of overlap between those vendors, and they're not sure who is supposed to do what, when, how, and why. Therefore, we end up paying multiple people for the same project. We have people that are working on other people's equipment, and this creates a problem because they're not experienced in that area, so now they've broken it, per se. And now we have to have somebody come in and fix it. If they don't know what they did, then there's another level of confusion. The cost goes up because we're getting nickel and dimed in different situations because we're bringing in one group here and we have to bring in somebody else to fix those issues. And there tends to be a little bit of finger pointing because nobody really wants to take responsibility for some of the stuff. And if you look at the contracts, they are very broad. And so technically, it may not fall under that umbrella. In previous years, vendors have been allowed to determine their own assignments and priorities, and that's okay in some instances, but that really should be up to the city. If we need something and we need it today, then we should be able to say this is a priority and have somebody address that issue. That also leads to other problems with the cross, I just lost that word, but anyway, they don't think through what they're doing. It adds a level of poor customer service, and there's a lack of professionalism in some of the instances when you're asking for something and they think that that is not as important as something else. There is not a standard policies and procedures manual or guidance in IT, and that creates some confusion and some upset whenever we don't have policies and procedures to follow. Anybody in any department can go to anybody else and purchase something that they want versus something that they need. And that it leads to a lot of overspending and then we end up with equipment that we don't use. And what we purchase needs to be utilized in the most efficient way. And then there are too many ways to get support. We have multiple vendors, and so if you have a problem, you have to put in a ticket with this person to address this part of the problem. You have to put in a service ticket with this person to address this part of the problem, and there's no communication. And so what happens is the problem doesn't get resolved. Our proposal is to bring in one group that would be our sole respondent. If you have a problem, you go to this one company, you put in your ticket, they will reach out and look for the people that will help you. That way we know what it's gonna cost us, and the problem will be resolved in a set amount of time. And then there are no material automation efficiencies. So that's my part for right now. I want to introduce you to John Cross, who has over 30 years of IT experience. He's a Marine Corps veteran. He's also pastored a church, so he does a little bit of everything. He was brought in May as a consultant to help us assess our entire IT footprint, where we could make some cost-saving changes to help us work more efficiently. And then he also was able to address some issues that we've had ongoing for a number of years. And those issues have not been completely resolved, but pretty much. And John is going to tell you a little bit more about himself and then True North and what we're looking to do with this partnership.
How are you? Thank you for taking the time to allow me to speak today. Rebecca's right. So I joined the city a couple of months ago, and we started looking at everything from infrastructure, PCs, applications, desktop applications, enterprise applications. We started looking at all of those things in order to figure out really what does the city have, what are they using, how are they using it, what are the best practices, and those kinds of things. And so as Rebecca has mentioned, there's just a number of things that are seemingly systemic. And I will tell you, I've been doing this many years, and what I have seen here at the city is not in any way by far the worst I've seen. Right, so I have another client who shall remain nameless, and it's a hospital client, not anywhere that you would ever go visit. But they had a hole in their data center floor, and they had air conditioners that leaked on their servers. I mean, all kinds of crazy things. And so we didn't find anything like that here in the city of Terrell, so that's good. But there were a number of things that, as Becca mentioned, that can be addressed. And so our recommendations, working with Rebecca, is you need published policies, you need formal policies and guidelines around just about every aspect of the way in which the city does business digitally. And so that's one of the things that we're recommending. Ensuring that future contracts have a little more teeth and are a little more specific, and those kinds of things. And I've got many years of contract management experience and working, just kind of looking through those. There's some room for improvement in some of those. And so Rebecca and I we took a good hard look at each one of those. I put in here this little comment, manage costs versus being managed by cost, right? And so that's just my little quip to say, ultimately, if we don't control it, it will control us. And so I have to say, I'll take a pause for a moment. I have to say this. I think you all know Miss Anderson's background, right? She's the library director. She does not have an IT background. She's been given IT based on her ability to manage and do all the things that Mr. Sims is ultimately looking for her to do in terms of helping control IT. When I first sat down with her and we started talking about what does a modern IT department look like, how does it operate, what are the expectations that you should be imposing upon your vendors, and all of those kinds of things. Not only was she in agreement, but she had also done enough research to know that those were the things that the city desperately needed. And so I have to publicly commend her for her ability to step in, not only manage through the sort of cost overruns that were happening in the previous immediate years, and sort of corralling all of that, but just the fact that she's educated herself on some of this, and it's been a pleasure to work with her. So on vendor management, outsourcing, not just staff augmentation, by having multiple vendors do point solutions or be brought in to do point solutions, that gets a little cumbersome to manage all the way around. So having an outsourcer or a managed service provider that is, to use the phrase, the single throat to choke, right? The one person that you're going to hold accountable, the one firm you're going to hold accountable for everything from quality to whatever, that is my recommendation. Managing against SLAs, not FTEs. So this isn't just about, do I have somebody that can do this, right? A good managed service provider, an outsourcer, doesn't come to you and say, I don't have the personnel to do this. They may say, I don't have the skills to do this at the moment, therefore I'm going to procure those, or I'm going to take a little extra time for this project or whatever, but it should never just be, I can't do that. Because I don't have the sheer bodies. Because it's about SLAs. And if we set up an SLA or a service level objective with a managed service provider and say, we need these incidents dealt with in a certain period of time, we need these major incidents dealt with over a certain period of time because they're urgent and priority one for the city, then we expect the managed service provider to respond that way and to manage against that. And then to expect some efficiencies over time, right? So the world is digital and it's not going away, right? And digital is just the term that we in my industry use just to sort of claim all things, right? But the reality is we're no longer tapping out procurement requests on rocks, and we're no longer using telex to do whatever, right? We have to be a little more modern in terms of interacting with the public, interacting amongst ourselves, and there are platforms, software, hardware, infrastructure. There are all kinds of things out there that can help take the city of Terrell into the next, modern age, the next stage, and ultimately what Rebecca and I have talked about to be a model municipal IT environment. So on a technical side, there needs to be a complete survey. The service providers that have been here for a long time, and so there's I think a lack of accountability in terms of assets that the city owns and a city has paid for that we need to go and get our hands around. So that means physically going out to sort of every office, every device, touching it, feeling it, putting an asset tag on it, making sure that it's all there. And that me? And having that, and then that actually creates and should be managed as a database. It's a database of information. It's important information for the city. Regardless of what you ultimately do with that, from a technical perspective, I need to know that when Mr. Sims calls and says that something is broken on his machine, exactly what machine does he have and the like, right? In addition, it plays a part into finance. Every one of these devices, whether it's a server, network switch, hardware for desktops, these monitors, everything has an expected lifespan, and it has a depreciation cycle. And all of that stuff needs to be ultimately managed, and it can be managed with a proper asset management process. So mitigating the gaps associated with what we don't know and what we would like to know, reducing cost and controlling cost by optimizing the environment, the procurement processes, and ultimately managing the environment from a comprehensive perspective instead of just having point solutions or point vendors managing just their part. From an operational perspective, what we ultimately envision is we want all of the employees of the city, regardless of who you are and what you do, it should be as frictionless as possible. Now that's a big IT word that we like to use in our industry, and that just simply means that it should be easy for you to reach out to IT and get support by either picking up the phone, by sending an email or what have you, but it should all go to the same service desk. As Rebecca mentioned today, it goes to multiple service desks, and again, not everybody has an understanding of who those people are and what those people are really supposed to do, and so when they get a ticket, they just think it's mine to work on, so I'm gonna go and work on it, when it's not really the case. So by having all of the tickets routed through to a single vendor, or a single service desk rather, then they can then divvy out the work to the right provider and the right vendor to get the work done as efficiently as possible. And they will hold those people accountable, those vendors accountable. Single responsible partner for all things coordinating of other vendors, and then holding the partner to quality standards and measures. So those are all of my recommendations, and that all comes down, I'll pause there for a moment. Are there any questions or comments?
Not yet.
Okay. And that leads me to the recommended managed service provider outsourcer that I am recommending is True North IT Services. There are certain vendors in the enterprise today that would be displaced, one of them being Alps. Tuaris is being used today for cybersecurity. They do a lot of monitoring of individual PCs and the firewalls. That would also be subsumed by True North. Some of ANT's work, basically everything that ANT's does, they work inside the building and they work outside the building. They are the city's ISP. They're the internet service provider. The work that's inside the building, True North would do. All of the work outside the building, running fiber, making sure all the buildings are connected, all those kinds of things, ANTS would continue to do going forward. And then Cave Consulting, they manage some of our productivity suite as well as the websites for the library and the city. And so some of that work, the productivity suite management, the G Suite management, that would come to True North. And we would, at the moment, going to leave the website management with Cave. At least that's the proposal at the moment. So I will pause there as yield my time, answer questions.
So some of this is really a Q&A on, hey, this is in our scope and this is out of our scope. So will you help us manage physical and cloud-based servers? In scope or out of scope?
Okay, if you will give them just a second, they're gonna give you a whole list of.
Okay, well then I'm going to yield and let the presentation just
Okay,
keep rolling.
so let me bring up Trace Brown. He's one of the co-founders of True North IT Services, and he will talk a little bit about True North and introduce the team, and then we'll all come up and answer whatever questions you have there at the end. Thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you so much for taking the time this evening, and just excited to be here and the opportunity that's presented. So my name is Trace Brown, as John mentioned, co-founder, CEO of True North IT Services. And we're just going to step through here. So as John and Rebecca have both pointed out, we have discovered some issues within the IT department, and we would like to go through how True North plans on tackling at least 6 of those through this presentation. So just first, a little bit about True North. With 65+ years of combined experience, True North is perfectly suited to be able to handle the IT infrastructure for the city of Terrell. We all come from various backgrounds, be it hospitals, be it school districts. We are more than anxious and ready to come in and tackle the city's IT infrastructure. So. First off, what we're going to do is provide on-site, just as what John Cross has been doing already for the city. We will provide a virtual CIO, Chief Information Officer. So this person will work closely with the IT director and the management team to be able to come in and to be able to provide that roadmap of exactly what's been going on now, to uncover issues, to be able to provide but be the single point of contact for the IT director team. Unified management of vendors, as was discussed, with having so many vendors, it can get complex about who to go to, the city employees, who to reach out to, who to go communicate with whenever they have a particular need. True North will come in and actually be that single point of contact. We will provide the single source of help desk for you to call into, for the city employees to call into. We will either resolve the issue ourselves, or we will take the issue to the vendor, work with the vendor to make sure that no issues fall through the cracks, and make sure that it's done in a timely fashion. Budget management. So we will work closely with Rebecca and team to be able to ensure that there are no budget overlaps and where people are blowing out the budgets like it's happening right now. And so what we'll do is we will come in with the contract management. We'll make sure that we're holding each of the vendors to their contracts and within their contracted scopes and areas of expertise. 24/7 help desk is just that. We were going to provide 24/7 support to anyone within the city. And so what that means is just that. I mean, you will be able to call anytime, night or day. Police officer in the middle of the night has an issue and needs support, he will be able to get that. He will be able to get support in the middle of the night for whatever was going on. On-site staffing. So we're going to provide an on-site tech that will be here Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, to be able to provide the on-site support that's needed for the city. On-site staffing. I'm sorry. Next piece is no more Band-Aids. So True North, we believe that it's not only important quickly, efficiently to fix issues that arise, but also to help prevent the issues from rising in the first place. So this is my analogy, best analogy here is firemen are extremely important. When a fire arises, got to get the people out there to put the fire out. But also the fire marshal is equally important. Coming up, preventing the fire from happening in the first place. So we will employ tools and techniques, automation, in order to prevent the issues from arising in the first place. This leads us to our scope and services of what we're going to provide, what we're not going to provide. So I think this will lead to some of the questions you had. We can just go through, sorry. First top is just on-site services that we're going to be providing. Unlimited help desk services. SolarWinds RMM, 24/7, 365 monitoring and alerts. So this will be installed on every device that is enabled and can allow it. Automated remediation of common problems, patching and updates, support for common end user applications, liaison for support of department enterprise applications, semi-annual technology evaluation meetings, hardware and software purchase, consultation and procurement, peripheral device connection support and management, assist with setup and routine of support, multifunction scanners and printers, assist with informal education of common features and functions in supported hardware and software. Out-of-scope services would include cost incurred on parts, equipment, or software, not covered by manufacturer's warranty, cost of parts, equipment, software, and associated fees, licenses, certificates, backups, etc. Cost of maintenance contracts for hardware or software packages, whether acquired from True North or any other source, custom programming, modification of software code, multifunction scanner and printer hardware, maintenance, and consumables, toner, paper, etc. And then formal training services of any kind. So I can pause here. I know you had a question.
Okay, so good. This part of the presentation did answer some of it. So talk to me about patching and updates. And right now, I don't know how we do it, and I don't need to know.
Okay.
But, so how often would those processes take place?
So the quick answer is as often as needed, because there are emergency patches that Microsoft or some other vendor will push out, and we will get alerted to those through our tools. And what we would do is with our RMM agent, we would be able to push that out to every city controlled, every city controlled device all at the same time. So if it was something that was going to require a reboot or a restart of the server, then we would have scheduled maintenance time, maintenance windows as to not to affect everything within the environment. But as far as just end user devices, we would push those out almost immediately. We would send out a notification saying, hey, this is about to happen. Other than that, we would have, like I said, a maintenance window. Microsoft pushes out patches every Tuesday. And so we would have a maintenance window that would occur around that time, make sure that it doesn't interfere with anything that's happening in the city, and those patches would just get pushed out automatically.
Okay, let's say that Mr. Sims doesn't like to reboot his computer, so his patch may not have taken. Do you have the ability to force a patch if needed?
We can absolutely force reboots and restarts on systems with our agent. What we would do in the case of Mr. Sims or someone like him, someone that probably at a VIP level, and we'll probably work with Ms. Anderson on that, is we would never just come in and force ourselves on any system without notifying. Now, there would be some systems, library systems that are unmanaged or that we might just come in and just restart on a whim, but we would try to coordinate with him or anyone like that just as much as possible. Yes, to answer your question, yes, we can force a restart at any time.
So you can physically see a list of personnel that may not have accepted patches.
That's exactly what we're going to be providing. So in our meetings with Ms. Anderson, what we'll be doing is we'll be providing her a list of exceptions and a list of machines that are falling outside of the scope. For whatever reason, whether it be they just haven't restarted, the patches have been pushed, they just haven't been restarted yet, we'll be able to know that, or whether we're having a problem communicating with that device because it's lost internet connectivity or whatever might be going on. Those will fall out as exceptions, and we'll be able to address those as needed.
Okay, and your on-site
yes,
personnel, I know that there'll be just probably a number to call. Will that person be dispatched from the external help desk?
Oh, no, there will be a person on site, 8 by 5, Monday through Friday. So he will be here, yes, he will be, you mean like, so that we'll have the external dispatch of the help desk. Tickets will roll into that help desk. They will get resolved remotely if possible, but also would be dispatched if hands are needed to go put on the device or whatever's happening, then yes, he would be dispatched and go out at that point.
Okay. And Grady, did you have a question?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Brown,
Yes, sir.
I just wanted you to clarify something for me. Out of scope services, that's just pretty much, you guys don't offer that at all?
It's not necessarily that we do not offer it, it's that within the contract that we provided and the scope of work that we provided, these services are outside of that scope. And so we would definitely either, if the city needed those services, what we would do is we would discuss how we could go about them. If it was something that we could provide, they just might be provided at an additional cost, but we would just take those on a one-by-one basis.
Well, thank you. You answered my second question. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And then logistically, Mr. Sims, we have multiple buildings. We like to collect buildings in the city. So how, what are the logistics of the on-site IT professional that, is there a vehicle involved? Is there a vehicle allowance? Is there?
I'm going to ask Becca to come up, but my comment for you is that, to me, you've got this inherent great thing about the city. Not only do we have buildings, we've also got remote locations. We've got water towers. We've got wastewater pump stations. We've got all sorts of things out in the field. And so, yes, they're going to support all of those. But Becca, go ahead.
We have a vehicle at the library that is a city vehicle that can be used for this kind of thing because the on-site staff person can be located centrally. We have space for them now at our literacy depot. We didn't discuss a car allowance, but my assumption was that would be part of, they have access to a vehicle if they need it. Yeah.
I can just tell you from our standpoint, at this point, we had not planned on using a city vehicle. We were just going to use our own and incur that cost.
Councilwoman, any questions?
No, it all sounds pretty clear. It sounds like you've done the consulting piece for us to tell us what's been working, what's not, who's all placing their hands in the same pot, and you're proposing different, or an array of services for us to accept moving forward. So the cost that I only see, no, I'm jumping ahead in the presentation here. I only see 3 months worth of cost. Is that correct?
So do we want to talk about the transition slide or go ahead and jump to the?
Yeah, let's let him pick up his PowerPoint where he stopped and then go from there. He'll get to your question in just a second.
I can get right to that. Just let me finish this part here. So our transition plan is we are at the end of your fiscal year. So instead of entering into just a 2-month contract and then a 12-month after that, what we're proposing is a 14-month contract. So the first part of that contract is going to cover August and September. And during that phase, we're going to be in a transition phase. And so we'll be doing the asset and software inventory, knowledge transfer from ALPS to True North IT Services, incident shadowing, where we would be first month shadowing ALPS as they're working through the city and fixing problems, and then contract due diligence. So it's during this time that we are shoring up the contract. There's parts of the contract that are fixed cost for us, and then there's parts of the contract that are how many assets do you have within your environment. So that's why we have to get through the asset and software inventory so that we can know what those fluctuating costs are, so we can hone those in and know exactly what the city's going to be paying. Okay, September, we do incident reverse shadowing. This is where True North steps in. We become the IT provider of choice. We have ALPS at our back helping us in the event that there are any issues that maybe we don't know about or that they can point us towards or something like that, just to make sure that the city is fluid and still working just as it needs to be. And then so at this point, we're also implementing our baseline ticketing system. So we're putting our ticketing system in our knowledge base, so we're starting to fill this data up with what the issues that are arising in the city, building it towards incidents that may be occurring. At this part, we're also starting our gap assessment. So gap assessment, things of issues that could arise such as security concerns. So they're going to be prioritized. So I will go through the city and I will look at your firewalls, I'll look at your switches, I'll look at your software licensing, hardware, how old are your servers? Are they out of warranty? So there's going to be issues within the city that we're going to find, and this is going to create gaps. And then what we're going to do is we're going to prioritize those gaps according to issues that as we deem fit. So like if you have a hole in your firewall and people from the outside world are just able to poke around on your network, obviously that's going to be priority one. We're going to take that first, and then we'll just step through each of those gaps that we have identified and work through those priorities. Contract review and finalization. So by the end of September, we'll have finished the asset and software inventory. We'll know exactly where the contract is going to be, and we will finalize that with you. And so that way you'll know what that fixed cost is, and we'll know what the fluctuating cost is, at least until you grow, right? So as you grow and more devices join the network, then that's where that fluctuating cost would arise. Or if part of the city, we decide not to do that service anymore, then the cost could fluctuate and go down. In October, we would begin our steady state. This is where we begin our gap remediation, roadmap, and baseline SLAs. So we would begin working with Rebecca. We talked about service level agreements, where we're going to be working through how long should these issues take. When an issue comes in, what is the expected time frame? How long should you wait? Should you wait 4 years to fix an issue at the police department? Is that acceptable? Right? So those types of things, you will have us on record saying that we will fix these issues. So either we're going to do it or we're going to bring somebody in that can fix it for you. Right? And that's what we're offering. So, cost True North pricing. So first couple of months during the transition phase, what we're offering is to lower the cost because, especially during the first month, we're not going to be absorbing all of the cost. Our agent's not going to be installed out on the field, in the field, on all the machines, because we're in this transitional period where ALPS is leaving, fulfilling their obligations with their contract that they're currently under, but we're just in this shadowing, but we're also working on the asset and software inventory. Same thing with month 2, staying at that same price. And then in month 3, we start the steady state, which is the $30,000, and then that would continue on for the duration of the next 12 months.
So just to be clear, that means October through next September is $30,770 a month.
Yes. Right. So, go ahead. Come on. So the service desk, this is the piece. So the core component here, the 18,973 is the piece that is remaining steady all the way throughout the contract. So those are our hard costs. The part that will be fluctuating is the service desk cost. And so this is where we're installing the agents, or we have, so I'll just give you an idea. So month 1, month 2, even though we're not going to have the agents, the reason why the money is where it is because I plan on having 3 to 4 people on ground for that full duration of those 2 months. So doing the asset software inventory, so even though we've allocated 1 person to be here 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, during those 2-month transitional periods, I plan on it to be 3 or 4 in order to make this a smooth transition, for us to wrap our mind around all the needs of the city, to be able to prioritize any issues that may arise. And so that's why the money is where it is, but it is still at a lower cost. And then, but that part, The number that we have there is based now solely on what I believe the Tuaris agent has been able to pull for us of how many agents are out in the field. But really, until we do the asset and software inventory, we won't know that number, that exact number.
So what I did not see was in the scope was a cellular data management, meaning are we managing cell phones? Are we managing hotspots through this program?
Not yet. We're working on, the next part is going to be a stipend presentation on the cell phone devices, mobile devices, but that's not part of this just yet. That is coming.
You'll see a presentation during your August budget retreat related to changing our cell phone policy from a, hey, the city of Terrell has issued me this cell phone, and the city of Terrell has to maintain this and pay the data plan on it and all that sort of good stuff, to a program where we say, hey, sign this piece of paper, and when you sign this piece of paper, you guarantee as an employee that you'll be owning a phone capable of a list, and then in exchange for you owning your own phone that is capable of that list, we pay you a stipend on a regular basis as your compensation for being required to do that. That's a transition that we think is very healthy, and you'll see a longer presentation about that at the August budget retreat.
So what I'm hearing, Mike, about the cell phones is that we're no longer going to scan a cell phone and say, we are covering the expense on it, but we're going to say, we're handing you this phone and.
We will not hand you a phone at all. We will say, as part of your employment at the city of Terrell, if you're in this range, okay, then you have to have a phone that does X, Y, and Z. And in exchange for you having your own phone that does X, Y, and Z, we're going to give you a stipend every paycheck for that. I don't give you a phone. I don't own the phone. I expect you, the employee, to provide that phone. Given the laundry list of things we might require an employee to do with their phone, some people will be at a low level, some people will be a high level, okay? Because they may be requiring some people to do more. I'll use Mike McKeska as an example. I'm going to expect that Mike McKeska can use his phone to get a gigantic file with construction plans on it and double check something at 6 a.m. because he's got a live construction project going. So he's going to sign a more elaborate stipend agreement, and it's going to require more of him and his private phone, and his stipend will be higher. There'll be other people who have a lower level of use of their phone, and they'll receive a lower stipend and have lower requirements from what we want them to be able to do with that phone. So that's a big, long transition. That's complicated. That's legal agreements. So I'm going to say let's extract that from this conversation, because I'm going to give you plenty of meat on that in August.
Okay. Councilman Simpson, do you have any additional questions?
No, sir. We can just move on, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, I am also out of questions.
Okay. Just the last final slide would just be introducing the team. Again, myself, Trace Brown, co-founder, and I will be the executive delivery partner here for the city of Terrell. And so what that means is just that you would see me often. You would see my face and be able to utilize my services. I think Mr. Sims asked the other day, what if one of you were on the road and needed support, needed to be able to connect in, you were at a hotel but wanted to be able to join the meeting, would you have support for that? That's who I would be. I would be that support. So you would have my personal cell phone number, you would be able to call me, and we'd be able to work through those issues. And then you have John Cross, who would be the VCIO. He's also advisory services. Charles Ramirez, senior sysadmin, senior network engineer. Trent Brown is also co-founder, my nephew. He is also a senior developer. Ben Smith would be the on-site field service tech, who will be here in the city Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And Jacob Cheek is going to be manning the help desk and would be the one that people would be calling on the phone. And as he's putting in the tickets for the employees, then he would be that. Thank you so much.
Okay, sounds like a good step forward. We're probably a few years behind. So,
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
to that. Next item, 6.4, discuss Parks and Downtown Improvement Corporation Incorporation Resolution 21-3. Mr. Sims is going to discuss the paddock board resolution and explain more of the proposed paddock capital projects.
So, Mayor and Council, I'm going to play the role of Glenn Caldwell tonight. Glenn was at a different engagement, and so I'm going to walk you through a few things. The very first thing you see here is Resolution 2021-3. That's the third paddock board resolution, and we're very happy with it. It tells us what they've recommended to you. Recall when they adopted their initial capital plan quite some time ago, part of that was to do a series of park improvements and borrow money and make debt service with a portion of their contract, with a portion of their Type B sales tax funds. So if you read Section 2, that's kind of your spoiler alert for what their recommendation was. I'm going to ask Dawn if she can get me over to the PowerPoints associated with this, which starts on agenda item page. It's the item on agenda item page 70. Okay, that's fine. I can talk about it while you see if you can get it up, and council can follow along on agenda item page 71 is where I'm going to start. Agenda item page 71 is the set of proposed, that's the original paddock ones, and I'll tell you what, let's do. In the interest of the fact that it's already 6:30, I'm going to abbreviate this a little bit, and I'm just going to stick on the agenda. I'm sorry, on the resolution. So on the resolution, I'll just kind of go through the list there, and that'll be easier. They have money in their budget available for $3.5 million worth of park improvements. Those park improvements, they discussed quite a bit. One option for their park improvements was to do a AstroTurf field at Ben Gill and to light that. Another one was to do the, it's all right, because I noticed it's not the right presentation, so that's fine, yeah. The one option was to do the park lighting limited to a new AstroTurf field. And I think the reaction from the paddock board when they kind of kicked that idea around was, well, gosh, before we spend the money to put an AstroTurf field out at Ben Gill as a practiced AstroTurf field, let's instead concentrate on something more basic. And they picked bathrooms as a thing to do that would be taking care of the basics. There's 7 different bathrooms that we have at all of our parks, and all of those bathrooms would be replaced in some way based on this spending recommendation. So to walk through the recommendation, it's Breezy Hill Park and ball field lighting, and that is basically the softball field at Breezy Hill Park. That's what it takes to get lighting up at that location, so we would move forward on that. The next one is Breezy Hill Parkland acquisition and land preparation / drainage. That's essentially the wooded field on the north side of Breezy Hill Park. So that's the area north of Polk where we've already acquired some land. We have some other land to acquire there, and we think that that's about $250,000 worth of work. But at the time we get the land in the shape we want it to, get it to drain the way we want it to, we've got issues on the south side of Breezy Hill that present the same problem. Then Ben Gill Park lighting, that's the parking lot is the first chunk of that. So we've got some lighting we need to do at the parking lots at Ben Gill. We can do that for about $100,000. That's included there. Then we have Ben Gill Park field lighting in the amount of $1 million. So what does that pay for? That gets me practice quality lighting on the existing football practice field. That gets me practice quality lighting on the central part of the soccer complex. And then it gets me what I would say game quality lighting on the field that is at the corner of Colquitt and 9th, and the field that's directly adjacent to the Excel Center. So the center chunk would have practice level lighting of those soccer fields. The ones on the 2 on the sides, corner of Colquitt and 9th, and the Excel Center, those are the ones that get the higher higher intensity lighting. So then you move on from that and you say, okay, we have a restroom package. We've listed that in the amount of $1.5 million. We found what we think is going to be a good solution, which is a modular product that's built off-site. It's 100% concrete. It's almost like a tilt wall concrete bathroom that you bring in from off-site. They're very, very durable, and we love that a lot. So this has been a trend lately in a lot of city parks. We think that we can get the quality out of that unit and also get a long-lasting and a good price on it. We want to try one first, so we're kind of kicking around which one to try first. We want to make sure that we like it, and then after that, there is enough money built into the budget to make sure that we get all the tie-ins. There's going to be places where we need to do water and sewer underground as well. There's going to be places we need to pour some concrete. There's going to be places where we need to make sure that we extend sidewalks in different places in different parks. So that's included there. We've given the whole thing a $400,000 contingency. If we have a cost overrun at Breezy Hill, we have a cost overrun with some of the lighting, we'll have that money available in that $400,000 contingency that is shown there. I'm sure that we'll be paying for some consultant services as well, and we'll be able to do that out of that contingency budget as well. So their recommendation coming forward to City Council is that they've approved those. They've authorized the transfer from the Paddock Corporation Fund to the City of Terrell Interest in Sinking Fund. Of course, they're borrowing this money, but you need to vote to approve it, and so they're saying, yes, please borrow this on our behalf. And that's their recommendation to you. So I'll let you look at the PowerPoint that was in the packet. That's actually the one that is more focused on the AstroTurf version, but that's okay. We'll get you emailed out the other version, which includes some of those bathroom photos. Not urgent for you to vote on that right now. This was just a discussion item. So what we'll do is we'll bring back a little bit more information to you next time around. But I'd be happy to answer any questions about it at this time.
All right, Mike, thanks for explaining it. And then I'd ask the councilwoman who's on Paddock, do you have any additional input for us on it?
When I think about, and I'm currently looking at some of the modular bathrooms that are built, and from past experience on serving on the Parks Board and just utilizing the bathrooms and seeing how they can become unusable based on, what do you call it? Vandalism, thank you, Mike. Vandalism, I'd ask that we look at bathrooms as far as the material for the sinks and the toilets, material that is durable. So not only on the outside of the building, but the inside to help with vandalism.
I think that's a great comment, and I'll tell you, I happen to be in both Allen and Plano over the weekend, and it may surprise you, but they're big cities, wealthy cities, and they're just going with straight stainless steel in all of their bathroom fixtures because you've just got to have something that you can fight against. And so we've got to get past the point of trying to keep up with replacing porcelain all the time. And I think that's exactly where the Paddock Board wants to go. The same presentation was also provided to the Park Board, and I can tell you the Park Board had a very positive reaction to the whole thing as well. So I think we're going in the right direction. I'm taking this in the format that we've done several other projects. I want to make sure that we've got a general plan for spending the money, which is what this lays out for you. And then, of course, as we do individual steps of this, you'll see some other individual spending items as this money becomes available. You might be thinking, okay, wait a minute, when do we vote on all of this debt? Remember that August the 3rd is your time where we make true on voting on the notices of intent that we sent out a few weeks ago. So the ads you've seen in the newspaper that says, here's what we're borrowing, this is one of the collection of projects included in that.
Okay, I would say, hey, this is a giant leap forward, right? I started on parks in 2014, and there was no master plan and no money, and this is a different world, and I'm very proud of it, so that's great. Okay, and then we will see this borrowing come forward.
Coming soon.
Coming soon.
Next couple of meetings.
Okay, great. We're going to move on down the line. Item 6.5, discuss May monthly financial report. Looks like Jay Ayers is here to present the numbers.
I'm going to tell both Jay and Mayor Pro Tem that we've got a little executive session to do after Jay's presentation, so we're going to have Jay do lightning round. But if you got any questions for Jay, you email him, you let me know, write it on a piece of paper, throw it at Jay, whatever you need.
All right, we're gonna dig right into this. The memo is just a brief summary of the financial report, so I'm gonna just skip over and just touch on a few things in the financial report. On page 82 of the agenda, you get a general fund summary breakdown. Revenues were at 2.3 million and expenditures were at 2.5, with a net income of roughly 200,000. On the revenue side, we've collected $24.7 million of the $30.7 million amended budget. And as far as under expenditures, we've only expended $19.2 million in May, and we have roughly 11 million in expenditures that we can expend in the general fund budget. On the next page, it pretty much gives you a breakdown of what the budgeted revenue is for FY 2021, and below that, below the graph at the top, it gives you a breakdown for May 2021. And as you can see, sales tax was a major part of revenue for May 2021. On the following page, as you can see in red, in the bar graph, you can see in red, that's the actual budget amount for each department. The blue is the year-to-date that's actually been expended, and every department seems to be under their allocated budget. Then on the following page, you get a property tax. This is just taxes current. I just want to remind everyone that the 9.3 million, roughly 875,000 of that will go into tiers. We're going to make a journal entry to actually transfer that money where it's supposed to go. And then what I really want to expound on is sales tax. I was really surprised when I seen this number. Sales tax for May was at $1.7 million, which is extremely high compared to last year. It's $638,000 more than what we received this time last year. Utility fund revenues were at 1.4 million. Expenditures were at 1.3 million. We had a net income of 102,000, and it seems to be doing pretty good. The only thing that I have noticed with utility fund and water revenue is revenues have kind of slowed down a little bit, and that's probably because of the heavy rains that we've been having here lately. So people's not able to wash their cars and things of that nature and water their yards. I guess the next thing that I want to touch on, let's take a look at the equipment replacement fund. See, on page 91, revenues were at 123,000 and expenditures were at 91,000. Net income was 32,000, and equipment replacement fund year to date as of May 31, 2021 is pretty much even. So that's good. They're on par. And then I think the last portion I'll cover is the information technology fund. They're still doing pretty decent. They still have a lot of wiggle room with the revenues. So I expect the information technology fund to be good at the end of FY 2021. I think that's pretty much it. Investments haven't been too good here lately. I've actually been consulting with time value investments to look at some other opportunities with investing our funds to get us a bigger return on investment. So, and that's pretty much it.
Okay, the big takeaway is sales tax is up 1.7, woo-hoo.
Yeah.
Here's the official, and if we have any questions, we're gonna email you and Mike.
Yeah.
And then I'd say, hey, if any of you any of us email questions, just please kind of gather it and shoot it out to all of us for a kind of a sidebar Q&A on finance. But I think it's, numbers are looking great. Okay, that being said, thank you, Jay. We are moving to item number 7, and which is executive session. We're going to adjourn into executive session according with the government code 551.072 deliver. On, okay. Don, we're probably going to start a few minutes after 7, just FYI.
Yeah, I will. I'll read that off. You got it.
We are now back in regular